Jacksonville, a child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks and their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history of this land of flowers.
The Week That Was from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The date of this program is the 19th of January, 2019. And as we normally do here, we remember the work of Stetson Kennedy, the Stetson Kennedy Foundation, down by Jacksonville, Florida. We play that particular theme. We also remember Jerry Pippin, who died in 2015, our broadcast partner from the very red state of Oklahoma, and we broadcast the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. So getting those things out of the way, over the weekend we have a schedule. We'll have This Week in Economics from our Numbers Man division of the Boston Red Network. We'll be talking macroeconomics, where the economy is going, what is happening with the shutdown, the tariffs, etc. And during the week, we did a little segment, I should say, on actually it was a program on the agricultural economy. We'll redo some of that because people need to understand where agriculture is and where the rural community in this time of peril. The latest on the shutdown, or later today, DJ Trump will make an address, I suppose, or announce something from the White House, or the parking lot, who knows where he'll be, on the latest on the shutdown. The latest we have is that there are no new negotiations at this time. We'll see what he has. There's almost 1 million workers furloughed. We'll do some reporting on that. There is a teacher strike in Los Angeles. That's the second largest school district in the country, at least there in Los Angeles, the Unified School District. Also, the urban school district, the opposite to that school district, which is called the charter schools. We've talked a little about the charter schools here. We do not favor charter schools because they siphon off much needed money from the public school system. So those are some things resting. And we also will have on Sunday special programming for Dr. King's birthday. He would been his birthday is actually, but the official birthday on Monday. This is King Day weekend. A lot of special events, coast to coast, from West Virginia to Los Angeles to Philadelphia, and points in between. States and cities will have all types of special programs. The National Action Network has a Dr. King breakfast in Washington, and various other functionaries. They have events in Chicago also, and they will be thinking about LaCoy McDonald, who was brutally murdered by a Chicago policeman, shot 16 or 17 times. The copper was sentenced on a Friday to a little over 6 years for second-degree murder. It is a miscarriage of justice, no doubt about that, and it shows the vicious racism within Chicago. It was a Cook County judge that gave the sentence, and that is where the people of Chicago have to work, is in the Cook County circuit. I can remember the Cook County circuit having appeared there more than one time. Anyway, nonetheless, there's not any improvement in that particular circuit. There is a race for mayor in Chicago coming up in February. We'll be talking with Emma Young. I put in a call to Emma. Emma was busy last night, so we'll get to Emma and get her take on what happened to Mr. McDonald, and also the mayoral race. There are several candidates there, and I understand Emma is supporting one. Don't recall who the candidate was. And the police head that was McCarthy, that was ousted because of what happened with Mr. McDonald, is also running for mayor on a right-wing platform. We need to be very, very cognizant of what is going on. We have Uncle Carl here to talk about the latest. We'll have his spin. He's writing, as usual, in the Wall Street Journal. Some people ask me why we have Uncle Carl. Well, we want to give both sides, and we can also give commentary on Uncle Carl's commentary. And if he has anything correct, we point that out, and obviously the rest of it is there. So those are some of the things that's going on, and we'll have our normal reports from the Public News Service, from the Washington Post, and various other in between. We'll also look at college hoops, college basketball, and we won't have as many scores as we did last night. The NBA and the National Hockey League. We're boycotting the NFL. A lot of machinations going there with African-American coaches. But firstly, we'll go to the Women's March. We have their website here, and just want you to listen to what is going on tomorrow. It's national, and it's in D.C. Here we go.
Our future. I know you don't completely understand what's happening right now, but you can feel that something is deeply wrong in America. I know that's scary, and sometimes I'm scared too. But that's why I want to tell you about the women in our family, because they are the strongest people I know. These past few years have been tough. Powerful men who think they can do whatever they want. They laughed at us, thought they had us beat. But the women in our family, we marched. We took to the streets, and 5 million of us raised our voices. I hope you remember that day as one of the proudest moments of my life. And we didn't just march. We organized, reclaimed our time, held firm on every important issue facing this country, supported every ally doing what's right. The women in our family, we won't be silenced. And when the men in power saw that we were starting to change things, they panicked. They tried to scare us, but their time was up. The women in our family are a part of a movement that's sending shockwaves through every campus, office, every chamber in America, so that hopefully you will never have to face what we did. The women in our family, we rise like the water, high enough, strong enough to break down every single wall put in our way. And we will not quit until we wash away the old world that tried to keep us down. So, don't be scared. I'll always be here for you. And so will the millions of women I've met fighting. We're family now, and more will join us, because the work is only beginning.
The Women's March, that will be, they call it the Women's Wave is Coming. That will be the National March, will be in Washington, D.C., and there will be many, many marches around the nation as they move on with women and from everywhere, from Illinois on. We're going to see that, and let me just get the national team here. We'll put a link to this. Tamika Mallory. She is the co-president and a board member. She used to be at the National Action Center under the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. And Ms. Brand here, she's another co-president. And Carmen Perez, she's a board president. Of course, our own Linda Lesueur, Palestinian, she is on the board. And Deanna Butler is also on the board there. And then there are people that are on the national team. Kim Russell, we can't name everyone, obviously, here. Rachel Deliri is one of those people. Cassidy Finlay is another one there, and Avery Jones. So we're looking at some other people, the alternative people here. Ted Jackson, Bradley Williams, and many, many others are part of this team of the Women's March. And let's look at their press room here very, very quickly, and we'll have this link on our programming, so fear not there. But the recent press releases, this is released on the 18th. Women's March puts its power to work with Women's Agenda platform of politics, and we are on the 19th, so let me just look at the latest release here. In Washington, D.C., a Women's Agenda. Over the course of 2 years, the Women's March has steadily built its power, organizing large-scale marches, mobilizing in 2018 and 2017, fully throttling, fighting back against the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, power to the polls in the November midterm election, and we all know what that record was. Now, with a record-breaking number of women in the Congress and an integrated network of grassroots advocates, policy experts, women leaders, the Women's March is wielding its power, influence federal policy, and bringing a change for those who need it the most. The Women's Agenda lays out the priorities of the organization for the next 2 years and serves as a roadmap for the work ahead. The platforms includes passing the Equal Rights Amendment, remember working on that, universal health care, Medicare for all, investing in independent living and autonomy for women with disabilities, expanding the Violence Against Women's Act to include Aboriginal and Native American women, democracy reforms that include voting rights, campaign finance reforms, decriminalization of sex work, something that's went in the EU for a very long time, passing the Equality Act, reducing racial health disparities in maternal health, and repealing the Hyde Amendment. That was old Henry Hyde, who I think is still in jail. The full agenda can be found here. You can go to it later. The Women's Agenda was created with an impact of over 50 women from diverse communities who work on different issues and represent a unified declaration of what the women's movement wants to see in 2019 and beyond. That's from Carmen Perez Jordan of the Women's Movement. It is the first intersectional feminist federal policy platform to cover so many issues. It is a national evolution from the 2017 Unity Principles, which were created by 24 women movement leaders. The 2019 Women's March happening tomorrow. That's Saturday, today, actually later today. We'll cover this incidentally. Will be a mass mobilization, our women's wave, to commemorate the 2017 march and demand concrete policy changes listed in the agenda. More than 300 sister marches are taking place all over this country, with dozens scheduled around the globe. Dozens of march leaders and policy experts are convened by the Women's March, crafted a vision of a new federal policy for the women's movement, and remain engaged in the implementation over the next 2 years. So these are the principles. This is what they want to do. They will be in Washington, D.C. They will be outside of Chicago. And there's been interference from various groups that are sponsored by the corporate media machine. These groups have tried to do what they actually can do to sabotage the march, and putting Tamika Mallory as a focal point there, and her relationship with the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, which has been known that she's been related with the Nation of Islam since her son was killed in the 80s, so that's a long relationship, and when she was at the National Action Center as a principal there under Dr. Sharpton, the national leader. So that is something that's firm, and also the situation with our sister, Ms. Salur there, and the Palestinian that's on the board, and with Carmen Perez. This is picking the movement where they can, trying to pick it apart. There are groups of people out there that would like to go back to the 1990s, when the Democrats brought forward Bill Clinton, a so-called centrist Democrat, that deregulated the banks, got rid of the of Castile, and at the same time he destroyed the social safety net, put more male African Americans in jail than that were in slavery. And that's rhetorical there. I don't have the actual number right before me, but that was what you got. And trying to recreate these characters and convince you to make your selection based upon something that's really not selectable. We go back to the comments of the late Malcolm X about the African. The African in the South at that time could not vote, and we'll extend that now to voter suppression in particularly in Georgia and in Florida, and in Pennsylvania, and in Ohio, and in Wisconsin, on the Boss Walker, who fortunately got retired. But these are some of the things that we see, that we fight against. And at the same time, in New York, African Americans and any progressive could not vote for Bernie Sanders. Why? Because only a person that is registered in the Democratic Party could vote there. That needs to be eliminated, and open up those primaries, as they are in some states where anyone can vote. Mail-in ballots, we have those in Oregon, in California. What we don't like, however, in California, actually are two things. One is in this non-party jungle-type election that they have. In other words, their election for governor, they were not designated parties. We believe the parties should be designated. And also ranked choice, they have that in San Francisco and in Oakland, California. As the leader, Jesse Jackson, out of Chicago, so eloquently says, that's discriminatory against African Americans. So there's some things that we have to deal with. And one thing people obviously can be assured of, this group here, that progressives will back the Women's March. African Americans, the followers of O.J. Simpson, will back the Women's March. You can take that to the bank. And as far as this selection process in these various caucuses across Iowa, into South Carolina, New Hampshire, and primaries here and primaries there, no matter whom they try to keep out, if they try to keep Bernie out, if they try to keep Liz Warren out, and all the progressives out, we will, as Jesse Jackson said high and look low. That was actually Reverend Moss. But anyway, in Cleveland, we'll look at this and we'll evaluate this, just as Alexandria-Ocasio-Cortez made an evaluation and upset the racist machinations of CBS News to not have any African Americans in their quote-unquote primary coverage. What's very important is how the news is presented, whether it be on CNN, on MSNBC, Fox News, etc., where people that have a substantial, this is not 1962, but people that have a substantial interest and substantial numbers in the voting process, and let no one be fooled. In states like Florida, African Americans that follow O.J. Simpson have a significant presence. Were able to run a governor and almost won. In Georgia, a significant presence there. And we're not going to let anybody bamboozle us into thinking we don't have one. And they can put all these Twitter King bookers and these other flim-flam artists out there they want. Forget it. You have to separate out the progressive movement, the movement of African Americans, etc., from some of these politicians running around here trying to sell themselves out and sell out the people. That has to stop. So this agenda that is put forward at the Women's March, we endorse it 100%. Now let's roll on here. You got the Washington Post here. Democrats and activists have punished Trump with a new strategy of just simply ignoring him. Some people have talked about that. Elizabeth Warren, once one of DJ Trump's biggest antagonisms on Twitter, isn't engaging the president these days, and even after he went after her when she and her husband were having a beer. Trump didn't come up in the Golden Globes Award, departure from 2 years ago. Many people have suggested you take him out of the news circle and you put Trump out of business. Trump, who recently penned about being alone at the White House, is lately finding himself in a position that he is rarely been in over the years, ignored. That's why he's running now to Kim Jong-un, so that the world will see him as he's having a little summit. DJ Trump, who his political catch has been driving and on rearing ability to goad other people into fights that benefit him. Well, that's the old thing. Karl Rove was the master of that one. So what's happening when instead he is met with something of a snag? The new silent treatment limits Trump's ability to dictate national coverage and the frame of the day. They should have been doing this a long time ago. Any decent political consultant that has put together a decent campaign, even if that consultant just got out of college or high school, understands one thing: don't let the opposition frame your candidate or frame your cause. Now, some of you can't get away from, and this is what's happening with the Women's March. The monopoly media has tried to frame it. Various other characters on the scene have tried to frame it, but they're in a new deal. The silent treatment limits his ability to dictate coverage. The former Secretary, Julian Castro, he's out of San Antonio, Texas, announced over the weekend Trump only mentioned him in passing. Kamala Harris, she is a senator from California doing a book tour that served up as a warm-up for likely campaign, rarely mentions DJ Trump. Trump has spent much of his presidency as an inescapable presence, at football games. That's one reason he drummed up the kneeling. Well, people aren't kneeling now out there. Trump's main activity from the time when he joined his father's company as a young man until he became president was attracting attention. That is from Michael D'Antonio. He is a Trump biographer and author of the book, The Truth About Trump. Well, they've got Trump's number, and now they're starting to exercise it with more preciseness. And this is what happens over time, and it's starting to happen. That has always been the old treatment. You don't mention the opponent and hope that. But with Trump, it was a different situation. Trump himself took the spotlight. Normally, the old stratagem is if you are ahead of the incumbent, you don't mention your opposition. But the job of the opposition is to dig up enough dirt where it comes in that way. Only 11% of the Democrats' ads during the final months of the national election mentioned DJ Trump, because DJ had nationalized the election, and they would have none of that. The most aggressive anti-Trump candidate, now we remember the attorney Michael Avanti, and activist Tom Sayer, who is spending millions advocating for the impeachment, decided against running. Well, the attorney Michael Avanti would have stirred up Iowa. Tom Steyer, S-T-E-Y-R, would have done very little. I'm not afraid of him, and I'm not afraid of his nasty language or his name calling. That's from Kristen Gillibrand. She's from upstate New York, said in an interview. And she possibly will be at the Women's March. We don't know. Some of the others are running away like hotcakes on Boston Street. Anyway, Democrats should not overlearn the lessons of 2018. That is from Goff Guerin, a Democratic pollster who argues that some level of combat with Trump is necessary. Well, we'd agree there. The midterms were about defeating Republican candidates, and 2020 will be, of course, about defeating Trump. Well, one thing to remember, what should do is Trump himself will frame that narrative. It's the same thing with the impeachment narrative. Trump himself will frame that. You don't need to spend your time out there. Censure, again here, I don't even pay attention to the president anymore. I focus on what we need to be done. That is Ms. Censure, the Palestinian that's on the board of Linda Censure. Let me get it right there. I don't go down into the rabbit hole of distraction. I don't care whether he orders hamburgers with people in the White House and whatever stunt he has there. Anyway. And someone else here, Anthony Agmantian, a comedian who became known primarily for impersonating Trump on Comedy Central, show was canceled after 23 episodes, so nobody wants to see DJ Trump. DJ Trump appears there in his lonesome. Decision stemmed, he said, from a combination of networks' skittishness over overtly political programming. We've seen some of that. And the Trump fatigue amongst viewers, comedians have struggled to strike the right balance. Well, good comedy is always out there. They should go and find Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby would be very good at doing this. I think there's a general fear that making fun of him gives him oxygen. Well, no doubt about that. Trump himself makes fun of himself, period. This is an opinion column here. Won't spend a lot of time on that. We got to get to Uncle Carl. The shabbiest U.S. president ever is inexpressibly a sad specimen. This is from George Will. Over half a quarter of the way through his interesting experiment with incessantly spasmodic president, much of the nation has become accustomed to daily mortifications. Has lost its capacity for embarrassment, and whichever is worse in the country. If the country's condition is calibrated simply by economic data, and if what is the U.S. is nothing but an economy, then the State of the Union is good, except that after 2 years of unified government under a party that formerly claimed to care about fiscal facts, of course they don't anymore. It's the $1 trillion deficit. He talks about deficit. A few people talk about the deficit, but you can forget about it. The president has kept his promise not to address unsustainable trajectory of entitlement programs, about the coming unpleasant reckoning. He said, yep, but I won't be here. So, in other words, it doesn't really matter there. There is no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea. Dislike of him should be tempered by this consideration. He is an almost inexpressible sad specimen. This is from George Will. Anyway, let me finish this up. Iowa, the electorate is bored with a menu of faintly variants of serving boredomism, or the 22nd Amendment will end, are the shabbiest, not our first shabby president, as Mark Twain and the novelist William Dean Howard stepped outside together one morning in a downpour and began. Howard said, "Did you think it will stop?" Twain replied, "It's always has." He was talking about that. Let me find Karl Rove. Here he is. Uncle Karl is writing in the Wall Street Journal on the 17th of January 2019 to shut down the next election. The government shutdown well into its fourth week. Republicans and Democrats are nearly focused on placating their base. They need to think bigger to make this his core supporters happy. Trump says he'll keep 9 federal departments closed until Congress approves his $5.7 billion for his little wall. To keep the Democratic base, rebbed the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, says she'll give the President Norvell and $1 for his signature promise, and Chuck Schumer seconds that. In the past, all three have shown a flexibility on this issue. Trump settled for far less funding in the wall in 17 and 18. He got $1.6 billion. That's not shabby each year, and long ago abandoned the notion of a wall spanning 1,954 miles. We call it 2,000 miles. For their part, Pelosi and Schumer supported President Obama's construction of a wall. They've had a wall going around for a long time, and of those three, Trump is open to a deal through his, though his team words compromising could irritate his base. Pelosi and Schumer, however, are mimicking Ulysses S. Grant's message to the Confederacy at Fort Donelson in February of 1862. No terms except an unconditional immediate surrender. Grant was right about that. Grant knew what he was doing. Focused so intensely on this shutdown, both parties risk forgetting what this fight is about, the next presidential election. Neither party can win that contest relying on its base alone. Uncle Carl knows that. They all know that. They've got all kinds of schemes. Considering how each party's base is likely to be for Trump, the January 15th Quinnipiac poll showed that 41% of the American people approve his job. 33% strongly approve. That's his core. And December 17th, the Fox poll had 38% said they would vote to re-elect him. Averaging these numbers suggests the president's hardcore supporters number close to about 37%. The late, great Jerry Pippen used to talk about that. And more about the 41 or so percent, 43, 44%, but you got to get the other 6%. In the exit poll, said they approve of Trump personally and had voted for him. This is insufficient for victory. Unfortunately, for the president, 6% of the voters cast ballots for him, even though they disapproved of him and thought he was not qualified. Democrats appear to have an easier path in 2020. After all, 55% of Fox News people surveyed said they plan to vote for an unnamed rival to Trump. But that underestimates the size of the Democratic base, which is likely to lie between the magic number of 43%. A CNN poll who wants Trump's impeached about 50%. That number is an elusive number. Even these numbers vibrate. Support for impeachment among independents, and as we look at that, it drops from 48% last September to 36% in December. Amongst young voters, younger than 45, support has declined from 53 to 45. I wonder about that number. Still, Democrats have the edge. At the base is between 43 and 53, as opposed to Trump's between 33 and 41. I wouldn't doubt on that. I wouldn't bet on that, I should say. Before they start popping corks, however, the Democrats should remember 43 wanted to re-elect President Barack Obama following the midterm. And we do remember that and remember it. But Barack Obama was a different type of candidate. We were coming out of a depression. And although the corporate media, the Republican Party, did everything they could to sabotage the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, as Jerry Pippen used to say, as people got accustomed to Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, they liked it. and that has happened. Republicans have been running around on the economic field chanting that Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act would destroy the healthcare system, the healthcare part of the economy. That's a substantial part. It did not. It actually, healthcare is a much larger and much more vibrant economy today than it was on the day that President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act. That is a fact. And this is what the Democrats have to look to, is facts. And hopefully today, as we march across this great country, from Washington, D.C. to Seattle, Washington, down to Portland, Oregon, to Los Angeles, over to Alamogordo, New Mexico, Phoenix, Arizona, Oklahoma City, Little Rock, Arkansas, Jackson, Mississippi, Orlando, Florida, naming some of these people, in Selma, Alabama, Milwaukee, towns around Chicago. Unfortunately, not in Chicago. The political act needs to get together and cement it in Chicago. We've seen that with Laquan McDonald and that verdict there. A lot of work need to be done in Chicago. Too much styling and profiling and no basic organization in the community has suffered, and really suffered via these so-called mega ministers in Chicago that backed Emmanuel. And Emmanuel has basically decentralized and destroyed African American voting power in Chicago. Those some things have to be looked at. The progressives need to rebuild the Democratic Party in Ohio. That needs to be done today. The grassroots efforts in Ohio, in Iowa. So this theme goes on and on. Let's go to the sports now. And ESPN. And we'll do a college ball first here. Hopefully we'll get everyone in. Eastern Michigan, we're at Buffalo. It was Buffalo 77-65. Maryland was at Ohio State. Maryland 75-61. Xavier at Villanova. Villanova 85-75. Marcus, they are the polling people. And Iowa 90-77. Northwestern in Rutgers. Our former music director, L.A. Bill Graham, alma mater, 65-57, and St. Joseph's and St. Louis, 68-57, and Ohio and Toledo. Toledo has always been a basketball powerhouse, 75-52. Let's go on to the real deal, the NBA from last night. The Grizzlies were in Boston. The Celtics 122-116. We like that score. The Heat were in the Motor City. Pistons 98-93. The Nets were at the Magic. The Nets 117 of Jersey to 115. Can't get closer than that. The Spurs were in OKC. Spurs pulled that one out 116-113. Glad to get out of town, no doubt. The Cavaliers and Jets. It was the and the Jazz in the wrong league. The Jazz won 15-99. The Warriors and Clippers down in Los Angeles. It was the Warriors 112-94. Mr. Curry was just too much. The Pelicans and Trailblazers out in Portland. It was 128 for the Trailblazers and 112 for Portland. On to the National Hockey League. We'll have to do on the Monday morning quarterback, get to the Australian Open. The Maple Leafs and Panthers 3-1. The Canadiens and Blue Jackets, it was Canadiens 4-1. The Islanders and the Capitals, the Islanders shut out the Capitals 2-0. The Senators and Hurricanes, it was 4-1 Senators over the Hurricanes. The Red Wings and Flames 6-4. Our Pelicans in overtime, 3-2 over the Coyotes. And finally, the Sabres and Canucks. It was Canucks 4-3. And let me just very, very quickly here. The Australian Open goes on. We have S. Hiplip, whomever that is. Oh, that must be in the women's, I guess. Yeah, over Venus Williams, okay, of USA. And We have a Zavonia, 6'6" to 6'3". I guess I should give this. Wait a minute, excuse me. 6'6". That's Zavonia, and Bolt was 3'2", and Hoplip was 6'6", and Venus Williams 3'2" in that match. So more from the Australian Open here is going on right now. S. Paluli, 7-6, 7-4. That's in the third set, and it doesn't get any easier. Poppering, 6-3, 6-4 is actually behind that. And in the second set, we have Gorgiti, 4-4, and Pekover, 6-3. And we do have a final here, Kurek, and I won't try to pronounce the last name of the other person, 2-6-6-6, and another final here, Gogera, 7-3-6. That is the Australian Open, and where we are in the Australian Open, we apologize for mispronouncing some names, but we did the best we could. And we see Virginia here and Duke over the weekend. Predictions on it. That will be tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Well, I haven't watched Virginia and haven't watched Duke in a long time. Nonetheless, this will do it for us on the week that was on Saturday morning on the 19th of January, 2018. Try to get out to the Women's March if you're around D.C. Otherwise, you have New York, Los Angeles. You have over 300 cities to go to, and some will be worldwide. We will do some coverage of that march later today on many of our usual outlets, adding outlets as we move along. You can check our RSS feed out. And I also found the Boston Red Times. Don't forget about it. I'm trying to find this new network we are on, and it's like sometimes things you can't. Oh, Radio Line is the name of the network. You can look that up. We are there, and they are 60,000 strong. They're in France. They're in Britain. They're in looks like Ireland here, and various other spots along the way. You can look them up. I had forgotten about them and looked them up and found that we were actually there, and many more networks there. They're in Asia, they're in Africa, they're in Europe, they're in North America, Oceania. I didn't know that, and South America there. I'm not sure in Oceania where they are, but well, okay. Oh, I see what they're doing here. Australia, East Timor, French Polynesia, Micronesia, New Zealand, New Caledonia. I heard of that one before. Okay, so we move along there. Across the African continent where we are, you can find us in Algeria, Angola, Benin, Botswana, Burkina Faso, Burundi, the Cameroon, Cape Verde, Eritrea, Equatorial Guinea, Egypt, Ethiopia, Guinea, Ghana, Gabon, the Ivory Coast, Kenya, Libya, Madagascar. These are just some of the places that they beam into. Morocco, Malawi, and into the Sudan, Togo. One of my friends from Togo there. I'll have to tell him about that. And Uganda, Tunisia, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. That's some of where we are in Africa. Across Europe, I give them a plug for them here. Albania, Belarus, Belarusian listeners out there. Croatia, we occasionally hear something from them. Belgium, Finland, Greece, Iceland, Ireland, Italy. We do get people from Italy. Luxembourg. Moldova. Let's see here. Macedonia. Romania. The Russian Federation. We get people from the Russian Federation, of course, also from the UK, just to name a few there. And in the south of the Americas, we have Brazil, Bolivia, Argentina. So if you're in those Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Venezuela, and various others. We'll leave it at that. You get us on the internet in Cuba. Anyway, in the Americas, Belize, and of course Canada, the Caribbean, Costa Rica, El Salvador, and Cuba. You can get us in Cuba, and Honduras, and Nicaragua, Panama, and of course in the States. Let me just go to Cuba here. I'm a little bit interested how you can several radio stations that are in Cuba, and don't know who they are right now. So I want. As to whom they are. But anyway, you can find us all around. Radio Line is the website, radioline.co. And not certain exactly where they are out of. They are also carried on the iHeart network, where we found them. And I was looking at Radio Wave, radiowave.co, and you can be found anywhere, 3-4, etc. And they are a worldwide organization also. And who is CO? Is that Colombia? I'm not sure. Let's see. CO. Have to do domain here. This is one of the things when you're doing live here. Domain. CO domain. Columbia. I thought it was Columbia. Okay. Anyway. And so that goes. Anyway, we thought we would preview that. Have a good week, everyone. And we'll talk to you on the Monday morning quarterback, as we normally do on a Monday morning on special programming for Dr. King's national holiday designate. That'll be tomorrow.